I'm Melissa.
And I'm Lee, and we are busy mums, company founders, and all-round early learning nerds. Welcome to our podcast, Growing Little Humans.
Kids aren't born with a user manual, so each week we'll try and cover many topics that you guys encounter and worry about each and every day while you're raising your little humans.
Kirsty van Rooyen is currently the assistant principal of an international school in China. She is a highly experienced educational leader with a Bachelor of Education in Early Childhood Development and a National Professional Qualification for Senior Leadership. Kirsty is currently advancing her expertise at the CBCI Institute with Rachel French, who is considered to be an authority in international conceptual learning. Hi, Kirsty. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we're just going to jump right in, Kirsty, and we're just going to ask, what are 21st century skills?
Okay, so I'm still currently actually in an educational setting, which is a great advantage for me. And I'm very aware of what 21st century learning skills are in students at the moment. And these are basically skills that help our students and children thrive today in this ever-changing world that we live in. We're talking about critical thinking, collaboration, communication skills, digital literacy, which is something I'll chat about a little bit later. But basically, in my mind, 21st century skills are all the building blocks of our next generation of children.
And Kirsty, these were not the kind of skills that we were worrying about 10 years ago even, were they? And it's just because our world is just evolving so rapidly. So why do you think they have become so important now?
Honestly, looking back over the past few years and being in education for as long as I have been, I've noticed that growing up the way that we did compared to the way that even my own children grow up now are so different. There's so many external factors in the world right now that influence the upbringing of children. One of them obviously being the world that we live in terms of the ease of everything, that we can just get anything delivered to our door. I live in a completely cashless society. My children have no concept of money at the moment. But also I've realized that as the years have progressed in my journey in schools, in international education, is that even children's gross and fine motor development is so much lower than it used to be years and years ago. Children don't ride bikes anymore. They don't climb trees. Am I allowed to say they cotton-wooled a little bit by their parents because they're so concerned of anything happening to their child? So I feel like, scratching your knee is a huge deal now, whereas many, many years ago it was like, just go and get a plaster and you're fine, and carry on and off you go.
And so all of these things that you're talking about, Kirsty, it's so true that our kids are not getting outside, they're not playing, they're not using those coordination skills and developing them, but also they're not actually using imagination play, are they? Because when they're climbing that tree or riding that bike, they might be playing cops and robbers or princesses and princes and, putting themselves, making up these amazing imaginative stories. And that's just a whole different skill set, isn't it?
Absolutely, and especially in the early years, right? So we are currently at the school that I'm at, we have 2 campuses, and one of the projects I've taken on is helping the teachers to actually build their classrooms around early learning. And what does that look like? That looks like taking every single desk and chair out of the room. They do not need to be sitting at a desk and a chair with a pencil in their hand. They need to be outside fiddling with mud and drawing pictures with mud and making mud cakes and communicating. Yes, routine is key in especially the little ones, because the first maybe 3 months they cry because they get separated from their parents. But that as well is also a skill that parents need to learn, is that they need to let go and trust the teachers. So one of the projects that I've been working on here has been me teaching teachers how to set up their classrooms to make it the most conducive environment to what a real world world actually looks like.
Yeah.
So I can give you a really cool example. So last year at the beginning of the school year, I went into the nursery class, and you walk in as a stranger, everyone starts crying when they see you. And as the year went on, what happened was I was able to go into the classroom and watch them take their little lunch boxes. And where I am in China, obviously it's like a little bento box. So I was able to watch them in the beginning of the year, have the teachers take the lid off for them. And I was like, what are you doing? We need to teach these students how to self-manage themselves, because this is a skill that children themselves don't have as it is. And by the end of the year, when I did go in, I was able to see them lift that lid, put it underneath the box, put the box on top, eat their food, and at the end of it, fit it back on like a puzzle. And I can tell you, whether I had this conversation with a grade 12 teacher, they would be like, that's the easiest thing in the world to do. And I wanted to say, actually, it's one of the hardest, because just building those foundational skills in a child is what they need to be able to actually be in this current situation of life as we have it now.
And just building their independence, as an individual. Yeah.
So we just sort of briefly touched about technology, but what role does that have in developing 21st century skills? You've sort of said play, and that independence has a very big role to play, but what does technology have?
So with regards to technology skills in students, it's very beneficial for me, for the school that I'm in, that the children all have one-to-one iPads, which is great. But at the same time, there needs to be a balance, right? So one of the things that we are rolling out is making sure that we are following a digital citizenship program where the students know, like there's a 20/20 rule. If you're on the iPad for 20 minutes and you've got to turn your face to something else, a window or something 20 meters away, and for 20 seconds, just give your eye a rest. Believe it or not, in China, the children actually have to do eye exercises every single morning before they start their day, which is quite interesting. But just in terms of literacy, digital literacy in schools nowadays, what we've been doing is trying to do an analysis of why are we using it and what are we using it for? Are we using it for students to document their learning on a digital portfolio? Great. That's independent self-management skills while using digital literacy. Or are we using it for them to kind of master a math skill on a platform like iExcel? For me, the latter, I don't really agree with. I feel like children should be manipulating things, especially in math, going through the concrete, then pictorial, then abstract kind of phase of math. So when it comes to digital literacy in the early years, I think you've got to be very, very intentional about the way that you roll it out to children. They've got to first understand what it's used for, how to use it. You've got to educate them on the ways to use it, as well as let them know that we can monitor, which is something that I do as part of my daily job, is monitoring devices, seeing how much screen time children are using them on, and then obviously consequences for that.
So as long as, sorry, just jump in there, Kirsty. So as long as it's purposeful and it's meaningful what they're using it for, not just playing games or doing whatever. So that time, that balance you're talking about is intentional.
Balance, between the traditional educational learning methods and then and the new tradition and the new technology that's coming into education.
Yeah, and to take that further. So how can parents support that in the home? How can they support the development of those 21st century skills in the home, and following on for what you're talking about, digital literacy?
Okay, so I'm going to go more into self-management and independence at home first, because in order for children to be able to understand how to use an iPad or how to use any kind of technology, whether it be a TV, computer, whatever, you've got to instill the independence and self-management skills into them first. So one of them would be, especially for younger children, I have a friend actually that's from Korea here in Shenzhen, and she has no TV in her house. I'm not saying that everyone has to do that, but her children are incredible. When they get hungry, they set the table themselves, and mom knows it's time then for them to eat. And she's instilled that in them, because she said, I can cook the food, I'm happy to do that. But if you want to indicate that you're hungry, you have to set the table. And by just having those management skills and that independence in even being able to self-regulate the fact that I have a hunger right now or a thirst, and I can manage my own, self-regulation is astounding. And sometimes then you as a mother walk out and think, oh my gosh, where did I go wrong? However,
But that's amazing to see those 21st century skills in place, aren't they? That they're out there if they're nurtured and they're developed.
yeah, absolutely. And I think in today's educational world, there is definitely a shift in the early years for teachers to be very, very, very aware of developing, critical thinking and communication skills and self-management skills before even thinking about picking up anything that has to do with the digital interface of introducing to these children. Because even and although the kids might be running around on the playground and they're having so much fun skipping, they're getting that dopamine hit out of that.
Yes.
But the second that they realize that when they're on a screen and they're seeing something they like and they're getting a dopamine hit out of that, that dopamine hit lasts so much shorter than the other one from them jumping rope outside, that's when the addiction starts, right?
Yeah, that's
Really
true.
interesting.
That's true. And so, Kirsty, when, in an educational setting or even for parents at home, and you're a mum as well, what are some signs that children are developing these 21st century skills?
What are some of the signs that they're developing 21st century skills? I think if I think of just my setting right now, it would definitely be seeing children self-regulating, resolving conflict on their own, managing their emotions, being able to speak about it. As a mom, a 21st century skill would be walking in, putting their bag where it needs to go, putting their clothes in the wash where they need to go. And those are things that don't happen anymore, I feel, because or maybe it's just in my life, because I've lived a very privileged life of growing up with a maid, and living abroad, we all have maids, so it does make it easier on the family, but at the same time it makes the kids so lazy that you almost want to take away the maid, make your life more difficult so that you can teach your child life skills. Interestingly enough, I'm reading this book. Can you see the cover?
Yes. Raising Mentally Strong Kids.
Okay. And recently published as well. I'm starting a book club with parents here at the school that I'm currently at. And what it is, one of the chapters in the book speaks all about like this mom who was actually took it. It was raising strong and capable kids, right? And basically what happened was it was a case study on a mom, and what she had done was she had made sure when her daughter was born, she had the best clothes and she had the best pram and she had the best this and she had the best cloth, and she pretty much did everything for her possibly could, and the father didn't really agree with it. And every time the child got into an altercation with another child, then the mother would send a gift to the other family and say, I'm so sorry. And it just was this continuous cycle of the mom doing everything for the daughter. And unfortunately, I think by the time she was 13, she was addicted to heroin. Just dad had kind of just said, I kind of wash my hands, because we've instilled nothing in our child. We have given her no way to solve a problem for herself, because we've solved every problem for her. We've given her a man to clean up after herself. She knows how to do nothing. So all she does now is anything that makes her feel good. And
which is short term, isn't it? It's very short term solution.
And it seems like there's just such a, from listening to you talk, Kirsty, seems to be such a connection between independence and self-regulation and development of these 21st century skills.
Definitely. And the other thing about digital literacy is that technology is like a double-edged sword, right? It can enhance our learning, but at the same time, and can also foster collaboration. But we have to strike a balance somewhere. And if you don't strike a balance as a parent, or actually even as an educator, then you're not doing the child a service. And that is to try and raise an emotionally stable child. We had an interview with a woman the other day, and she was interviewing grade 12 students, and they were talking about, they call it Gen Alf. Have you heard of it?
No. Is that the latest Gen?
Can't keep up with all the gens.
Generation Alpha, I think it's called. And it's this I'm not too sure what it's called, but it's something Gen Alf. And the woman was like, well, what do you mean? She goes, brain rot generation.
Yeah.
Brain rot generation. We're the brain rot generation because all the our brains aren't developing because all we do is we just kind of go through TikTok and check what's happening.
Yeah.
And we don't have face-to-face interaction with people because we're constantly interacting online. So it is a double-edged sword, and I think it's so important. I think it's so important nowadays that educators and parents are educated from a young age for children to understand that it's okay to get hurt. It's okay to have a fight. It's okay to have a conflict. It's okay to fall out of a tree and break your arm because you'll learn, right?
Yeah.
But again, you've got to have all the stakeholders involved in it to make sure that everyone is on the same page and everyone is going towards the same goal.
Yes.
Yeah, we talk
so
about
it's really important to be, constantly communicating with your parents so that they understand what the educators are trying to achieve and how important these skills are, the resilience and
all those.
and making your kids a bit tougher and mentally being able to cope with things. That they are such important skills.
And it's interesting because one of the things that I would like to do in the future is actually spearhead parent education on technology, on self-management skills, on 21st century skills. We do a thing here, Open Days, where we ask parents, what skills do you think your child will need one day when they get into the working world? And often what pops up is communication skills, collaboration skills, self-management skills.
Yeah.
And these are prospective parents that we're just quizzing to see what kind of skills they're looking for their child to have when they leave our school. And I'm not speaking specifically about our school. I'm just speaking about the general.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And there seems to be that there was a moment in time, I know, when my children were at elementary and kind of just finishing elementary where everyone was a winner. Everyone's a winner. We'd have sports day and they made it all team sports and everyone won. And I think I'm just starting to see now that thought process is coming to an end. And now, because at the time that it was happening, I was saying to my husband, well, what's going to happen when, 50 people go for a job and one person gets a job? We're not teaching our children to deal with disappointment and to get back up and to get back on the horse and keep going, And I think there's been a shift now and that they're stepping away from that everyone's a winner because they can see that it's not serving those children.
No, and it's the same as the 21st century skills. It's not preparing children for what happens when they leave
in
schooling
reality.
And the reality of that. And that's really, even from the early years, that's what we're beginning to develop. We're talking about developing these skills that children are going to take throughout their schooling experience and beyond. So, and that is not preparing them for that. So.
And the early years is laying that foundation.
And the interesting thing is that, if you think about it, right, not that we're going to divulge anyone's ages here, but I think this generation of parents are just so much younger that they're kind of also part of that generation that's okay to let everyone be a winner. And I think parent education is actually where it should start. And bring parents in and give them a scenario or a case study and let them read a story about a child that becomes addicted to heroin at 13 because the parents thought they were doing the best, but they actually weren't. They were just setting their child up for failure, right? And actually letting them feel what it feels like and to put themselves in those shoes and think, oh my gosh, that could be my child.
Is this the human I want to create?
And, that's really powerful, isn't it? Really powerful for parents to see other, situations that have happened. And that's part of what we're doing on Growing Little Humans podcast, is sharing this information for parents that, might have healthy questions, but they don't really know where to go and find them. So thank you so much, Kirsty, for sharing so much information on 21st century skills in the early years. And we'd like to, we'll share lots in the show notes, things that you've discussed today. So
and I think this is the topic, Kirsty, that we'd probably love to have you come back again and dive a bit deeper, because there is so much to talk about. And I think that 21st century skills today are just so critical for this generation. And I think, it's only going to become more needed as time moves on. And so, yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, Kirsty, and we look forward to having you back for round 2.
Oh, that would be so lovely. And thank you so much for having me and working out this time because of China time and Dubai time. But I'm happy to always be around.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. And here come the legals. Our podcast is purely brought to you for educational and entertainment purposes. We are just 2 hectic mums, and we are certainly not licensed therapists.
This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of licensed or qualified professionals. And if you do need some help, please seek out some professional advice.